When God began creating the heavens and the earth was a shapeless, chaotic mass with the Spirit of God brooding over the dark vapors. Then God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. God was pleased with it and divided the light from the darkness. He called the light daytime and the darkness nighttime. Together they formed the first day. And God said, "Let the vapors separate to form the sky above and the oceans below." So God made the sky, dividing the vapor above from the water below. This all happened on the second day. Then God said, "Let the water beneath the sky be gathered into oceans so that the dry land will emerge." And so it was. Then God named the dry land earth and the water seas. And God was pleased. And he said, "Let the earth burst forth with every sort of grass and seed-bearing plant and fruit trees with seeds inside the fruit, so that these seeds will produce the kinds of plants and fruits they came from." And so it was, and God was pleased. This all occurred on the third day. Then God said, "Let bright lights appear in the sky to give light to the earth and to identify the day and the night. They shall bring about the seasons on the earth and mark the days and the years." And so it was. For God had made two huge lights, the sun and the moon, to shine down upon the earth, the larger one, the sun, to preside over the day, and the smaller one, the moon, to preside through the night. He had also made the stars. And God set them in the sky to light the earth, and to preside over the day and night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God was pleased. This all happened on the fourth day. Then God said, let the waters teem with fish and other life, and let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created the great sea animals and every sort of fish and every kind of bird. And God looked at them with pleasure and blessed them all. "Multiply and stock the oceans," he told them. And to the birds he said, "Let your numbers increase, fill the earth." That ended the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth every kind of animal, cattle, and reptiles, and wildlife of every kind." And so it was. God made all sorts of wild animals and cattle and reptiles, and God was pleased with what he had done. Then God said, "Let us make man, someone like ourselves, to be master of all life upon the earth and in the skies and in the seas." So God made man like his maker. Like God did God make man. Man and maid did he make them. And God blessed them and told them, "Multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. You are the masters of the fish and birds and all the animals. And look, I have given you the seed-bearing plants throughout the earth, and all the fruit trees for your food, and I've given all the grass and plants to the animals and the birds for their food." Then God looked over all that he had made, and it was excellent in every way. This ended the sixth day. Genesis chapter 2. Now at last the heavens and the earth were successfully completed with all that they contained. So on the seventh day, having finished his task, God ceased from this work he had been doing. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he ceased this work of creation. Here is a summary of the events in the creation of heavens and earth, of the heavens and the earth, when the Lord God made them. There were no plants or grain sprouting up across the earth at first, for the Lord God hadn't sent any rain, nor was there anyone to farm the soil. However, water welled up from the ground at certain places and flowed across the land. The time came when the Lord God formed a man's body from the dust of the ground and breathed into it the breath of life, and man became a living person. Then the Lord God planted a garden in Eden to the east and placed in the garden the man he had formed. The Lord God planted all sorts of beautiful trees there in the garden, trees producing the choicest of fruit. At the center of the garden he placed the tree of life and also the tree of conscience, giving knowledge of good and bad. A river from the land of Eden flowed through the garden to water it. Afterward, the river divided into 4 branches. One of these was named the Pishon. It winds across the entire length of the land of Havilah, where nuggets of pure gold are found, also beautiful bdellium and even lapis lazuli. The second branch is called Gihon, crossing the entire length of the land of Cush. The third branch is the Tigris, which flows to the east of the city of Asher, and the fourth is the Euphrates. The Lord God placed the man in the Garden of Eden as its gardener to tend and care for it. But the Lord God gave the man this warning: You may eat any fruit in the garden except the fruit from the tree of conscience, for its fruit will open your eyes to make you aware of right and wrong, good and bad. If you eat its fruit, you will be doomed to die. And the Lord God said, It isn't good for man to be alone. I will make a companion for him, a helper suitable to his needs. So the Lord God formed from the soil every kind of animal and bird and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever he called them, that was their name. But still there was no proper helper for the man. Then the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep and took one of his ribs and closed up the place from which he had removed it and made the rib into a woman and brought her to the man. This is it, Adam exclaimed. She is part of my bone and flesh. Her name is woman because she was taken out of a man. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife in such a way that the two become one person. Now, although the man and his wife were both naked, neither of them were embarrassed or ashamed. Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. The serpent was the craftiest of all the creatures the Lord God had made. So the serpent came to the woman. Really? He asked. None of the fruit in the garden? God says you mustn't eat any of it? Of course we may eat it, the woman told him. It's only the fruit from the tree at the center of the garden that we are not to eat. God says we mustn't eat it or even touch it or we will die. That's a lie, the serpent hissed. You'll not die. God knows very well that the instant you eat it, you will become like him, for your eyes will be open. You will be able to distinguish between good from evil. The woman was convinced how lovely and fresh looking it was, and it would make her so wise. So she ate some of the fruit and gave some to her husband, and he ate it too. And as they ate, suddenly they became aware of their nakedness and were embarrassed. So they strung fig leaves together to cover themselves around the hips. That evening they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden, and they hid themselves among the trees. The Lord called to Adam, "Why are you hiding?" And Adam replied, "I heard you coming and didn't want you to see me naked, so I hid." "Who told you you were naked?" the Lord God asked. "Have you eaten fruit from the tree I warned you about?" "Yes," Adam admitted, "but it was the woman you gave me who brought me some, and I ate it." Then the Lord God asked the woman, "How could you do such a thing?" "The serpent tricked me," she replied. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "This is your punishment. You are singled out from among all the domestic and wild animals of the whole earth to be cursed. You shall grovel in the dust as long as you live, crawling along on your belly. From now on, you and the woman will be enemies, as will your offspring and hers. You will strike his heel, but he will crush your head." Then God said to the woman, "You shall bear children in intense pain and suffering. Yet even so, you shall welcome your husband's affections, so he shall be your master." And to Adam, God said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit when I told you not to, I have placed a curse upon the soil. All your life will you struggle to extract a living from it. It will grow thorns and thistles for you. You shall eat its grasses. All your life you will sweat to master it until your dying day. Then you will return to the ground from which you came, for you were made from the ground, and to the ground you will return." The man named his wife Eve, meaning the life-giving one, for he said, "She shall become the mother of all mankind." And the Lord God clothed Adam and his wife with garments made from skins of animals. Then the Lord said, "Now that the man has become as we are, knowing good from bad, what if he eats the fruit from the tree of life and lives forever?" So the Lord God banished him forever from the Garden of Eden and sent him out to farm the ground from which he had been taken. Thus God expelled him and placed mighty angels at the east of the Garden of Eden with a flaming sword to guard the entrance to the tree of life. And what we need to do right now is add the screen where everybody can chime in and see where we're reading from. There we go. All right, now you can see where we're reading from. Someone should have told me that. Hankerson, we can't see where you're reading from, but at least you got to hear the word. All right, Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Again, all of this is from the Living Bible. Then Adam had sexual intercourse with Eve, his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to a son, Cain, meaning I have created. For as she said, with God's help, I have created a man. Her next child was his brother Abel. Abel became a shepherd while Cain was a farmer. At harvest time, Cain brought the Lord a gift from, let's start that over, verse 3, Genesis 4 and 3. At harvest time, Cain brought the Lord a gift of his farm produce. And Abel brought the fatty cuts of meat from his best lambs and presented them to the Lord. And the Lord accepted Abel's offering, but not Cain's. This made Cain both dejected and very angry, and his face grew dark with fury. "Why are you angry?" the Lord asked him. "Why is your face so dark with rage? It can be bright with joy if you will do what you should. But if you refuse to obey, watch out. Sin is waiting to attack you, longing to destroy you, but you can conquer it." One day Cain suggested to his brother, "Let's go out into the fields." And while they were together there, Cain attacked and killed his brother. But afterwards the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" "How should I know?" Cain retorted. "Am I supposed to keep track of him wherever he goes?" Good Lord. But the Lord said, "Your brother's blood calls to me from the ground. What have you done? You are hereby banished from this ground which you have defiled with your brother's blood. No longer will it yield crops for you, even if you toil on it forever. From now on you will be a fugitive and a tramp upon the earth, wandering from place to place." Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. For you have banished me from my farm and from you, and made me a fugitive and a tramp, and everyone who sees me will try to kill me." The Lord replied, "They won't kill you, for I will give 7 times your punishment to anyone who does." Then the Lord put an identifying mark on Cain as a warning not to kill him. So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Then Cain's wife conceived and presented him with a baby named Enoch. So when Cain founded a city, he named it Enoch after his son. Enoch was the father of Irad. Irad was the father of Mehujael. Mehujael was the father of Methusael. Methusael was the father of Lamech. Lamech married two wives, Adah and Zillah. To Adah was born a baby named Jabal. He became the first of the cattlemen and those living in tents. His brother's name was Jubal, the first musician, the inventor of the harp and the flute. To Lamech's other wife, Zillah, was born Tubal-Cain. He opened the first foundry, forging instruments of bronze and iron. One day Lamech said to Adah and Zillah, "Listen to me, my wives. I have killed a youth who attacked and wounded me. If anyone who kills Cain will be punished 7 times, anyone taking revenge against me for killing that youth should be punished 7. Eve gave birth to another son and named him Seth, meaning granted. For, as Eve put it, God granted me another son for the one Cain killed. When Seth grew up, he had a son and named him Enosh. It was during his lifetime that men first began to call themselves the Lord's people." Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. Here is a list of some of the descendants of Adam, the man who was like God from the day of his creation. God created man and woman and blessed them, and God called them man from the start. Adam. Adam was 130 years old when his son Seth was born, the very image of his father in every way. After Seth was born, Adam lived another 800 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 930. Seth. Seth was 105 years old when his son Enosh was born. Afterwards, he lived another 807 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 912. Enosh. Enosh was 90 years old when his son Kenan was born. Afterward, he lived another 815 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 905. Kenan. Kenan was 70 years old when his son Mahalalel was born. Afterwards, he lived another 840 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 910. Mahalalel was 65 years old when his son Jared was born. After he lived 830 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 895. Jared was 162 years old when his son Enoch was born. Afterwards, he lived another 800 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 962. Enoch was 65 years old when his son Methuselah was born. Afterwards, he lived another 300 years in fellowship with God and produced sons and daughters. Then when he was 365 and in constant touch with God, he disappeared, for God took him. Methuselah was 187 years old when his son Lamech was born. Afterwards, he lived another 782 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 969. Lamech was 182 years old when his son Noah was born. Lamech named him Noah, meaning relief, because he said, "He will bring us relief from the hard work of farming this ground which God has cursed." Afterward, Lamech lived 595 years, producing sons and daughters, and died at the age of 777. Noah was 500 years old, and he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. Now, a population explosion took place upon the earth. It was at this time that beings from the spirit world looked upon the beautiful women and took any they desired to be their wives. Then Jehovah said, "My spirit must not forever be disgraced in man. Wholly evil as he is, I will give him 120 years to mend his ways." In those days, and even afterwards, when the evil beings from the spirit world were sexually involved with human women, their children became giants, of whom so many legends are told. When the Lord God saw the extent of human wickedness and that the trend and direction of men's lives were only towards evil, he was sorry that he had made them. It broke his heart. And he said, "I will blot out from the face of the earth all mankind that I created, yes, and the animals too, and the reptiles and the birds, for I'm sorry I made them." But Noah was a pleasure to the Lord. Here's the story of Noah. He was the only truly righteous man living on the earth at that time. He tried always to conduct his affairs according to God's will. And he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Meanwhile, the crime rate was rising rapidly across the earth, and as seen by God, the world was rotten to the core. As God observed how bad it was and saw that all mankind was vicious and depraved, he said to Noah, "I have decided to destroy all mankind, for the earth is filled with crime because of man. Yes, I will destroy mankind from the earth. Make a boat from the resinous wood, sealing it with tar, and construct decks and stalls throughout the ship. Make it 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Construct a skylight all the way around the ship, 18 inches below the roof, and make 3 decks inside the boat, a bottom, a middle, and upper deck, and put a door in the side. Look, I'm going to cover the earth with a flood and destroy every living being, everything in which there is the breath of life. All will die, but I promise to keep you safe in the ship with your wife and with your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive through the flood. Bring in a pair of each kind of bird and animal and reptile. Store away in the boat all the food that they and you will need. And Noah did everything as God commanded him. Genesis chapter 7, verse 1. Finally, the day came when the Lord said to Noah, go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth I consider you alone to be righteous. Bring in the animals too, a pair of each, except those kinds I've chosen for eating and for sacrifice. Take 7 pairs of each of them, and 7 pairs of every kind of bird. Thus there will be every kind of living, kind of life reproducing again after the flood is ended. 1 week from today, I will begin 40 days and nights of rain, and all the animals and the birds and reptiles I have made will die. So Noah did everything the Lord commanded him. He was 600 years old when the flood came. He boarded the boat with his wife and sons and their wives to escape the flood. With him were all the various kinds of animals, those for eating and sacrifice, and those that were not, and the birds and the reptiles. They came into the boat in pairs, male and female, just as God commanded Noah. 1 week later, when Noah was 600 years, 2 months, and 17 days old, the rain came down in mighty torrents from the sky, and the subterranean waters burst forth upon the earth for 40 days and nights. But Noah had gone into the boat that very day with his wife and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. With them in the boat were pairs of every kind of animal, domestic and wild, and reptiles and birds of every sort. 2 by 2 they came, male and female, just as God had commanded. Then the Lord God closed the door and shut them in. For 40 days the roaring floods prevailed, covering the ground and lifting the boat high above the earth. As the water rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely upon it, until finally the water covered all the high mountains under the whole heaven, standing 22 feet and more above the highest peaks. And all living things upon the earth perished, birds, domestic and wild animals and reptiles, and all mankind, and everything that breathed and lived upon dry land. All existence on the earth was blotted out, man and animals alike, and reptiles and birds. God destroyed them all, leaving only Noah alive and those with him in the boat. And the water covered the earth 150 days. Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. God didn't forget about Noah and all the animals in the boat. He sent a wind to blow across the waters, and the floods began to disappear. For the subterranean water sources ceased their gushing, and the torrential rain subsided. So the flood gradually receded until 150 days after it began, the boat came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. 3 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks appeared. After another 40 days, Noah opened a porthole and released a raven that flew back and forth until the earth was dry. Meanwhile, he sent out a dove to see if it could find dry ground. But the dove found no place to light and returned to Noah, for the water was still too high. So Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back into the boat. 7 days later, Noah released the dove again. And this time, toward evening, the bird returned to him with an olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the water was almost gone. A week later, he released the dove again, and this time she didn't come back. 29 days after that, Noah opened the door to look, and the water was gone. 8 more weeks went by. Then at last the earth was dry. Then God told Noah, you may all go out. Release all the animals, birds, and reptiles, so they will breed abundantly and reproduce in great numbers. So the boat was soon empty. Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives all disembarked, along with all the animals, reptiles, and birds, all left the ark in pairs and groups. Then Noah built an altar and sacrificed on it some of the animals and the birds God had designated for that purpose. And Jehovah was pleased with the sacrifice and said to himself, I will never do it again. I will never again curse the earth, destroying all living things, even though man's bent is always toward evil from his earliest youth, and even though he does such wicked things. As long as the earth remains, there will be springtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night. Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and told them to have many children and to repopulate the earth. All wild animals and birds and fish will be afraid of you, God told him, for I have placed them in your power, and they are yours to use for food in addition to grain and vegetables. But never eat animals unless their lifeblood has been drained off. And murder is forbidden. Man killing animals must die, and any man who murders shall be killed. For to kill a man is to kill one made like God. Yes, have many children and repopulate the earth and subdue it. Then God told Noah and his sons, I solemnly promise you and your children and the animals you brought with you, all these birds and cattle and wild animals, that I will never again send another flood to destroy the earth. And I seal this promise with this sign. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds as a sign of my promise until the end of time to you and to all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, and the rainbow will be seen in the clouds. And I will remember my promise to you and to every being, that never again will the floods come and destroy all life. For I will see the rainbow in the cloud and remember my eternal promise to every living being on the earth. The names of Noah's three sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the ancestor of the Canaanites. From these three sons of Noah came all the nations of the earth. Noah became a farmer and planted a vineyard, and he made wine. One day, as he was drunk and lay naked in his tent, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and went outside and told his two brothers. Then Shem and Japheth took a robe and held it over their shoulders, and walking backwards into the tent, let it fall across their father to cover his nakedness as they looked the other way. When Noah woke from his drunken stupor and learned what had happened and what Ham, his younger son, had done, he cursed Ham's descendants. A curse upon the Canaanites, he swore, may they be the lowest of slaves to the descendants of Shem and Japheth. Then he said, God bless Shem, and may Canaan be a slave. God bless Japheth, and let him share the prosperity of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. Noah lived another 350 years after the flood, and was 950 years old at his death. Genesis chapter 10, verse 1. These are the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who were the three sons of Noah, for sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, Tyrez. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarmah. The sons of Japhan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, Dodimnim. Their descendants became the maritime nations in various lands, each with a separate language. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, Sabtika. The sons of Ramah were Sheba, Dedan. One of the descendants of Cush was Nimrod, who became the first of the kings. He was a mighty hunter, blessed of God, and his name became proverbial. People would speak of someone as being like Nimrod, a mighty hunter, blessed of God. The heart of his empire included Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and the land of Shinar. From there he extended his reign to Assyria. He built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ur, Calah, Rezin, which is located between Nineveh and Calah, the main city of the empire. Mitzrayim was the ancestor of the people inhabiting these areas: Ludim, Anamim, Luhabim, Naphthuthim, Pathrusim, Kalsulihim, and from whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorim. Canaan's oldest son was Sidon, and he was the father of Heth. From Canaan descended these nations: Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinatites, Arvadites, Zemarites, Hamathites. Eventually, the descendants of Canaan spread from Sidon all the way to Gerar in the Gaza Strip, and to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, near Lasha. These then were the descendants of Ham, spread abroad in many lands and nations with many languages. Eber descended from Shem, the oldest brother of Japheth. Here's the list of Shem's descendants: Elam, Asher, Aphrashad, Lud, Aram. Aram's sons were Uz, Hul, Gether, Mash. Archibad's sons was Selah, and Selah's sons was Eber. Two sons were born to Eber: Peleg, meaning division, for during his lifetime the people of the world separated and dispersed, and Joktan, Peleg's brother. Joktan was the father of Almadad, Seliphah, Harzamatheth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzel, Diklah, Obal, Amineel, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, Jobab. These descendants of Joktan lived all the way from Mesha to the eastern hills of Sephir. These then were the descendants of Shem, classified according to their political groupings, languages, and geographical locations. All of the men listed above descended from Noah, though through many generations, living in the various nations that developed after the flood. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. At that time, all mankind spoke a single language. As the population grew and spread eastward, a plain was discovered in the land of Babylon and was soon thickly populated. The people who lived there began to talk about building a great city with a temple tower reaching to the skies, a proud eternal monument to themselves. This will weld us together, they said, and keep us from scattering all over the world. So they made great piles of hard burned brick and collected bitumen to use as mortar. But when God came down to see the city and the tower mankind was making, he said, look, if they're able to accomplish all this when they have just begun to exploit their linguistic and political unity, just think of what they will do later. Nothing will be unattainable for them. Come, let us go down and give them different languages so that they won't understand each other's words. So in that way, God scattered them over all the earth, and that ended the building of the city. That is why the city was called Babel, meaning confusion, because it was there that Jehovah confused them by giving them many languages, thus widely scattering them across the face of the earth. Shem's line of descendants included Arphaxad, born 2 years after the flood when Shem was 100 years old. After that, he lived another 500 years and had many sons and daughters. When Arphaxad was 35 years old, his son Shelah was born, and after that, he lived another 403 years and had many sons and daughters. Shelah was 30 years old when his son Eber was born, living 403 years after that, and had many sons and daughters. Eber was 34 years old when his son Peleg was born. He lived another 430 years afterward and had many sons and daughters. Peleg was 30 years old when his son Reu was born. He lived another 209 years afterwards and had many sons and daughters. Reu was 32 years old when Serug was born. He lived 207 years after that with many sons and daughters. Serug was 30 years old when his son Nahor was born. He lived 200 years afterwards with many sons and daughters. Nahor was 29 years old at the birth of his son Terah. He lived 119 years afterward and had sons and daughters. By the time Terah was 70 years old, he had 3 sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran had a son named Lot. But Haran died young in the land where he was born in Ur of the Chaldeans and was survived by his father. Meanwhile, Abram married his half-sister Sarai, while his brother Nahor married their orphaned niece Milcah, who was the daughter of their brother Haran. And she had a sister named Iscah. But Sarai was barren. She had no children. Then Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, his son Haran's child, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and left Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But they stopped instead at the city of Haran and settled there. And Terah died at the age of 205. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. God had told Abram, leave your country behind you and your people and go to the land I will guide you to. If you do, I will cause you to become the father of a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous, and you will be a blessing to many others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and the entire world will be blessed because of you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed him, and Lot went too. Abram was 75 years old at that time. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, the cattle and the slaves he had gotten in Haran, and finally arrived in Canaan. Traveling through Canaan, they came to the place near Shechem and set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. This area was inhabited by the Canaanites at that time. Then Jehovah appeared to Abram and said, I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to give this land to your descendants. And Abram built an altar there to commemorate Jehovah's visit. Afterwards, Abram left that place and traveled southward to the hilly country between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he made camp and made an altar to the Lord and prayed to him. Thus he continued slowly southward toward the Negeb, pausing frequently. There was at that time a terrible famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to live. But as he was approaching the borders of Egypt, he asked Sarai, his wife, to tell everyone that she was his sister. You are very beautiful, he told her, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, let's kill him, and then we can have her. But if you say you are my sister, then the Egyptians will treat me well because of you and spare my life. And sure enough, when they arrived in Egypt, everyone spoke of her beauty. When the palace aides saw her, they praised her to the king Pharaoh, their king Pharaoh, and she was taken into his harem. Then Pharaoh gave Abram many gifts because of her, sheep, oxen, donkeys, men, women, slaves, and camels. But the Lord sent a terrible plague upon Pharaoh's household on account of her being there. Then Pharaoh called Abram before him and accused him sharply. What is this you've done to me? He demanded. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why were you willing to let me marry her, saying she was your sister? Here, take her and be gone. And Pharaoh sent them out of the country under armed escort, Abram, his wife, and all his household and possessions. Genesis chapter 13, verse 1. So they left Egypt and traveled north into the Negeb, Abram and his wife, and Lot and all that they owned, for Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. Then they continued northward toward Bethel, where he had camped before, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had built the altar. And there he again worshiped the Lord. Lot too was very wealthy, with sheep and cattle and many servants, but the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all their flocks and herds. There were too many animals for the available pasture. So fights broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot, despite the danger they all faced from the tribe of the Canaanites and the Perizzites present in the land. Then Abram talked it over with Lot. The fighting between our men has got to stop, he said. We can't afford to let a rift develop between our clans. Close relatives such as we are must present a united front. I'll tell you what we'll do. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want that part over there to the east, and I'll stay over here in the western section. Or if you want the west, and I'll go over there to the east. Look, Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan River, well watered everywhere. This was before Jehovah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. The whole section was like the Garden of Eden, or like the beautiful countryside around Zoar in Egypt. So that is what Lot chose, the Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants, and thus he and Abram parted company. And Abram stayed in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain, setting at a place near the city of Sodom. For the men of this area were unusually wicked and sinned greatly against Jehovah. After Lot was gone, the Lord said to him, look, as far as you can see in every direction, for I'm going to give it all to you and your descendants. I'm going to give you so many descendants that like the dust, they can't be counted. Hike in all directions and explore the new possessions I am giving you. Then Abram moved his tent to the oaks of Mamre near Hebron and built an altar to Jehovah there. Genesis chapter 14, verse 1. Now war filled the land. Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, fought against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zebulun, and the king of Bela, called Zoar. These kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zebulun, and Bela mobilized their armies in the Siddim Valley, that is, the valley of the Dead Sea. For 12 years they had all been subject to King Chedorlaomer, but now in the 13th year they rebelled. 1 year later, Chedorlaomer and his allies arrived and the slaughter began, for they were victorious over the following tribes at the places indicated: the Rephaim and Ashtoreth, Karnam, and Zuzim and Ham, and Imam in the plain of Carthaim, the Horites in Mount Seir as far as El Paran to the edge of the desert. Then they swung around to Emishphat, later called Kadesh, and destroyed the Amalekites and also the Amorites living in Hazazon Tamar. But now the other army, that of the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zebulun, Bela, Zoar, unsuccessfully attacked Chedorlaomer and his allies as they were in the Dead Sea Valley, 4 kings against 5. And it happened, the valley was full of asphalt pits. And as the army of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some slipped into the pits, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then the victors plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and carried off all their wealth and food and went on their homeward way, taking with them Lot, Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and all he owned. One of them who escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was camping among the oaks belonging to Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner, and Abram's allies. When Abram learned that Lot had been captured, he called together the men born into his household, 318 of them in all, and chased after the retiring army as far as Dan. He divided his men and attacked during the night from several directions and pursued the fleeing army to Hobah north of Damascus and recovered everything: the loot that had been taken, his relative Lot, and all of Lot's possessions, including the women and their captives. As Abram returned from his strike against Chedorlaomer and the other kings at the valley of Shavar, later called King's Valley, the king of Sodom came out to meet him. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, Jerusalem, who was a priest of the God of the highest heaven, brought him bread and wine. Then Melchizedek blessed Abraham with this blessing: the blessing of the supreme God, creator of heaven and earth, be upon you, Abram, and blessed be of God, who has delivered your enemies over you. Then Abram gave Melchizedek 1/10 of all the loot. Then the king of Sodom told him, just give me back my people who were captured. Keep for yourself the booty stolen from my city. But Abram replied, I have solemnly promised Jehovah, the supreme God, the creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread from you, lest you say Abram is rich because of what I gave him. All I'll accept is what these young men of mine have eaten, but give a share of the loot to Aner, Eshcol, Mamre, my allies. Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. Afterwards, Jehovah spoke to Abram in a vision, and this is what he told him: don't be fearful, Abram, for I will defend you, and I will give you great blessings. But Abram replied, O Lord Jehovah, what good are all your blessings when I have no son? For without a son, some other member of my household will inherit all my wealth. Then Jehovah told him, no one else will be your heir, for you will have a son to inherit everything you own. Then God brought Abram outside beneath the nighttime sky and told him, look up into the heavens and count the stars if you can. Your descendants will be like that, too many to count. And Abram believed God. Then God considered him righteous on account of his faith. And he told him, I am Jehovah who brought you out of the city of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land. But Abram replied, O Lord Jehovah, how can I be sure that you will give it to me? Then Jehovah told him to take a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon, and to slay them and to cut them apart down the middle and to separate the halves, but not to divide the birds. And when the vultures came down upon the carcasses, Abram shooed them away. That evening, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a vision of terrible foreboding, darkness, and horror. Then Jehovah told Abram, your descendants will be oppressed as slaves in a foreign land for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and at the end they will come away with great wealth. But you will die in peace at a ripe old age. And after 4 generations they will return here to this land. For the wickedness of the Amorite nations living here now will not be ready for punishment until then. And as the sun went down and it was dark, Abram saw a smoking fire pot, and a flaming torch that passed between the halves of the carcasses. So that day Jehovah made this covenant with Abram. I have given this land to your descendants from the Wadi El Arish to the Euphrates River, and I give them these nations: Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. Genesis chapter 16, verse 1. But Sarai and Abram had no children, so Sarai took her maid, an Egyptian girl named Hagar, and gave her to Abram to be his second wife. Since the Lord had given me no children, Sarai said, you may sleep with my servant girl, and her children shall be mine. And Abram agreed. This took place 10 years after Abram had first arrived in the land of Canaan. So he slept with Hagar, and she conceived, and when she realized she was pregnant, she became very proud and arrogant toward her mistress Sarai. Then Sarai said to Abram, it's all your fault. What? Wait a minute. Okay. Verse 5, then Sarai said to Abram, it's all your fault. For now this servant girl of mine despises me, though I myself gave her the privilege of being your wife. May the Lord judge you for doing this to me. You have my permission to punish the girl as you see fit. Abram replied, what? So Sarai beat her and she ran away. Oh, The angel of the Lord found her beside a desert spring along the road to Shur. The angel, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? Hagar, I'm running from my mistress. The angel, return to your mistress and act as you should, for I will make you into a great nation. You are pregnant, and your baby will be a son, and you are to name him Ishmael. God hears, because God has heard your woes. This son of yours will be a wild one, free and untamed as a wild ass. He will be against everyone, and everyone will feel the same toward him, but he will live near the rest of his kin. Thereafter, Hagar spoke of Jehovah, for it was he who appeared to her as the God who looked upon me, for she thought, I saw God and lived to tell it. Later, that well was named the well of the living one who sees me. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old at this time. My Lord. Genesis 17 and 1. What a story. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to him and told him, I am the Almighty. Obey me and live as you should, and I will prepare a contract between us, guaranteeing to make you into a mighty nation. In fact, you'll be the father of not only one nation, but a multitude of nations. Abram fell face downward in the dust as God talked with him. What's more, God told him, I am changing your name. It is no longer Abram, exalted father, but Abraham, father of nations. For that is what you will be. I have declared it. I will give you millions of descendants who will form many nations. Kings shall be among your descendants, and I will continue this agreement between us, generation after generation, forever. It shall be between me and your children as well. It is a contract that I shall be your God and the God of your posterity, and I will give all this land of Canaan to you and them forever, and I will be your God. Your part of the contract, God told him, is to obey its terms. You personally and all your posterity have this continual responsibility, that every male among you shall be circumcised. The foreskin of his penis shall be cut off. This will be the proof that you and they accept this covenant. Every male shall be circumcised on the 8th day after birth. This applies to every foreign-born slave as well as to everyone born in your household. This is a permanent part of this contract, and it applies to all your posterity. All must be circumcised. Your bodies will be marked as participants in my everlasting covenant. Anyone who refuses these terms shall be cut off from his people, for he has violated my contract. Then God added regarding Sarai, your wife, her name is no longer Sarai, but Sarah, meaning princess. And I will bless her and give you a son from her. Yes, I will bless her richly and make her the make her the mother of nations. Many kings shall be among your posterity. Then Abram threw himself down and worshiped before the Lord, but inside he was laughing in disbelief. Me, be a father, he said in amusement. Me, 100 years old, and Sarah to have a baby at 90? And Abram said to God, yes, do bless Ishmael. No, God replied, that isn't what I said. Sarah shall bear you a son, and you're to name him Isaac, meaning laughter. And I will sign my covenant with him forever and with his descendants. As for Ishmael, all right, I will bless him also, just as you've asked me to. I will cause him to multiply and become a great nation. 12 princes shall be among his posterity. But my covenant is with Isaac, who will be born to you and Sarah next year at about this time. That ended the conversation, and God left. And that very day, Abram took Ishmael, his son, and every other male born in his household or bought from outside, and cut off their foreskins, just as God had told him to do. Abraham was 99 years old at that time, and Ishmael was 13. Both were circumcised the same day, along with all the other men and boys of the household, whether born there or bought as slaves. Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. The Lord appeared again to Abraham while he was living in the oak grove at Mamre. This is the way it happened. One hot summer afternoon, as he was sitting in the opening of his tent, he suddenly noticed 3 men coming toward him. He sprang up and ran to meet them and welcome them. Sirs, he said, please don't go any further. Stop a while and rest here in the shade of this tree while I get water to refresh your feet and a bite to eat to strengthen you. Do stay a while before continuing your journey. All right, they said, do as you have said. Then Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, quick, make up some pancakes. Okay, quick, make up some pancakes. Use your best flour and make enough for the 3 of them. And he ran out to the herd and selected a fat calf and told the servant to hurry and butcher it. Soon taking them cheese and milk and the roast veal, he set it before the men and stood beneath the trees beside them as they ate. Where is Sarah, your wife? They asked him. In the tent, Abraham replied. Then the Lord said, next year I will give you and Sarah a son. Sarah was listening from the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were both very old, and Sarah was long since past the time when she could have a baby. So Sarah laughed silently. A woman my age have a baby? She scoffed to herself, and with a husband as old as mine? Then God said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for God? Next year, just as I told you, I will certainly see to it that Sarah has a son. But Sarah denied it. I didn't laugh, she lied, for she was afraid. Ooh, these are some lying people. Then the men stood up from their meal and started on towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them part of the way. Should I hide my plan from Abraham? God asked. For Abraham shall be a mighty nation, and he will be a source of blessing for all the nations of the earth. And I have picked him out to have godly descendants, and a godly household, men who are just and good, so that I can do for him all that I have promised. So the Lord told Abraham, I have heard that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah are utterly evil, and that everything they do is wicked. I'm going down to see whether these reports are true or not. Then I will know. So the other 2 went on towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham a while. Then Abraham approached him and said, will you kill good and bad alike? Suppose you find 50 godly people there within the city. Will you destroy it and not spare it for their sakes? That wouldn't be right. Surely you wouldn't do such a thing to kill the godly and the wicked. Why? You would be treating ungodly and wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth be fair? And God replied, if I find 50 godly people, I'll spare the entire city for their sake. Then Abraham spoke again. Since I have begun, let me go on and speak further to the Lord. Though I'm but dust and ashes, suppose there are only 45. Will you destroy the city for lack of 5? And God said, I will not destroy it if I find 45. Then Abraham went further with his request. Suppose there are only 40. And God replied, I won't destroy it if there are 40. Please don't be angry, Abraham pleaded. Let me speak. Suppose only 30 are found there. And God replied, I won't do it if there are found 30 there. Then Abraham said, since I've dared to speak to God, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And God said, then I won't destroy it for the sake of the 20. Finally, Abraham said, "Oh, let not the Lord be angry. I will speak with this once more. Suppose only 10 are found there." And God said, "Then for the sake of 10, I won't destroy it." And the Lord went on his way, and when he had finished his conversation with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his tent. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. That evening, the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom, and Lot was sitting there as they arrived. When he saw them, he stood up to meet them and welcomed them. "Sirs," he said, "come to my home as my guest for the night. You can get up as early as you like and be on your way again." "Oh, no, thanks," they said. "We will stretch out here along the street." But he was very urgent until at last they went home with him, and he set a great feast before them, complete with freshly baked unleavened bread. After the meal, as they were preparing to retire for the night, the men of the city, yes, Sodomites, young and old, from all over the city, surrounded the house and shouted to Lot, "Bring out those men to us so we can rape them." Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. "Please, fellows," he begged, "don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters, and I'll surrender them to you to do as you wish. But leave these men alone, for they are under my protection." "Stand back," they yelled. Who do you think you are? We let this fellow settle among us, and now he tries to tell us what to do. We'll deal with you far worse than with those other men." And they lunged at Lot and began breaking down the door. But the 2 men reached out and pulled Lot in and bolted the door and temporarily blinded the men of Sodom so that they couldn't find the door. "What relatives do you have here in the city?" the men asked. "Get them out of this place, sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone else, for we will destroy this city completely. The stench of this place has reached to heaven, and God has sent us to destroy it." So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, "Quick, get out of the city, for the Lord is going to destroy it." But the young men looked at him as though he had lost his senses. At dawn the next morning, the angels became urgent. "Hurry," they said to Lot, "take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here and get out while you can, or you will be caught in the destruction of the city." When Lot still hesitated, the angels seized his hand and the hands of his wife and daughters and rushed them to safety outside the city, for the Lord was merciful. "Flee for your lives," the angels told him, "and don't look back. Escape to the mountains. Don't stay down here on the plain, or you will die." "Oh, no, sirs, please," Lot begged. "Since you've been so kind to me and saved my life, and you granted me much mercy, let me flee to that little village over there instead of into the mountains, for I fear disaster in the mountains. See, the village is close by, and it's just a small one. Please, please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? And my life will be saved." "All right," the angel said, "I accept your proposition and won't destroy that little city. But hurry, for I can do nothing until you are there." From that time on, that village was named Zoar, meaning the little city. The sun was rising as Lot reached the village. Then the Lord rained down fire and flaming tar from heaven upon Sodom and Gomorrah, excuse me, and utterly destroyed them along with the other cities and the villages of the plain, eliminating all life, people, plants, and animals alike. But Lot's wife looked back as she was following along behind them and became a pillar of salt. That morning, Abraham was up early and hurried out to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked out across the plain to Sodom and Gomorrah and saw columns of smoke and fumes as from a furnace rising from the cities there. So God heeded Abraham's plea and kept Lot safe, removing him from the maelstrom of death that engulfed the cities. Afterwards, Lot left Zoar, fearful of the people there, and went to live in a cave in the mountains with his 2 daughters. One day, the older girl said to her sister, "There isn't a man anywhere in this entire area that our father would let us marry, and our father will soon be too old for having children. Come, let's fill him with wine, and then we will sleep with him so that our clan will not come to an end." So they got him drunk that night, and the older girl went in and had sexual intercourse with her father, but he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. The next morning, she said to her younger sister, "I have slept with my father last night. Let's fill him with wine again tonight, and you go in and lie with him so that our family line will continue." So they got him drunk again that night, and the younger girl went in and lay with him, and as before, he didn't know that anyone was there. And so it was that both girls became pregnant from their father. The older girl's baby was named Moab. He became the ancestor of the nation of the Moabites. The name of the younger girl's baby was Benami. He became the ancestor of the nation of the Ammonites. Genesis chapter 20, verse 1. Now Abraham moved south to Negeb and settled between Kadesh and Shur. One day when visiting the city of Gerar, he declared that Sarah was his sister. Then King Abimelech sent for her and had her brought to him to his palace. But that night God came to him in a dream and told him, "You're a dead man, for that woman you took is married." But Abimelech hadn't slept with her yet. So he said, "Lord, will you slay an innocent man? He told me she is my sister." And she herself said, "Yes, he is my brother." and I hadn't had the slightest intention of doing anything wrong. Yes, I know, the Lord replied. That's why I held you back from sinning against me. That is why I didn't let you touch her. Now restore her to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet, and you shall live. But if you don't return her to him, you are doomed to death, along with all your household. The king was up early the next morning and hastily called a meeting at all the palace personnel and told them what had happened, and great fear swept throughout the crowd. Then the king called for Abraham. What is this you've done to us? He demanded. What have I done that deserves treatment like this to make me and my kingdom guilty of this great sin? Who would suspect that you would do such a thing like this to me? Whatever made you think of this vile deed? Well, Abraham said, I figured this to be a godless place. They will want my wife and will kill me to get her, I thought. And besides, she is my sister, for at least a half sister. We both have the same father, and I married her. When God sent me traveling from my childhood home, I told her, have the kindness to mention wherever you come that you are my sister. Then King Abimelech took sheep and oxen and servants, both men and women, and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah to him, his wife to him. Look, my kingdom over, and choose the place where you want to live, the king told him. Then he turned to Sarah. Look, he said, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver as damages for what I did to compensate for any embarrassment and to settle any claim against me regarding this matter. Now justice has been done. Then Abraham prayed, asking God to cure the king and the queen and the other women of the household so that they could have children, for God had stricken all the women with barrenness to punish Abimelech for taking Abraham's wife. Genesis chapter 21, verse 1. Then God did as he promised, and Sarah became pregnant and gave Abraham a baby son in his old age. At the time God had said, and Abraham named him Isaac, meaning laughter. 8 days after he was born, Abraham circumcised him as God required. Abraham was 100 years old at that time. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hears about this shall rejoice with me. For who would have dreamed that I would ever have a baby? Yet I've given Abraham a child in his old age. Time went by and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham gave a party to celebrate the happy occasion. But when Sarah noticed Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and the Egyptian girl Hagar teasing Isaac, she turned upon Abraham and demanded, get rid of that slave girl and her son. He is not going to share your property with my son. I won't have it. This upset Abraham very much, for after all, Ishmael too was his son. But God told Abraham, don't be upset over the boy or your slave girl wife. Do as Sarah says, for Isaac is the son through whom my promise will be fulfilled. And I will make a nation of the descendants of the slave girl's sons too, because he is yours also. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food for the journey, and strapped a canteen of water to Hagar's shoulders and sent her away with their son. She walked out into the wilderness of Beersheba, wandering aimlessly. When the water was gone, she left the youth in the shade of the bush and went off and sat 100 yards or so away. I don't want to watch him die, she said, and burst into tears, sobbing wildly. Then God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from the sky. Hagar, what's wrong? Don't be afraid, for God has heard the lad's cry as he is lying there. Go and get him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation from his descendants. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw well, and she refilled the canteen and gave the lad a drink. And God blessed the boy, and he grew up in the wilderness of Paran and became an expert archer. And his mother arranged a marriage for him with a girl from Egypt. About this time, King Abimelech and Phicol, commander of the troops, came to Abraham and said to him, it is evident that God helps you in everything you do. Swear to me by God's name that you won't defraud me or my son or my grandson, but you will be on friendly terms with my country as I've been toward you. And Abraham replied, all right, I swear to it. Then Abraham complained to the king about a well the king's servant had taken violently away from Abraham's servants. This is the first I've heard of it, the king exclaimed, and I have no idea who is responsible. Why didn't you tell me before? Then Abraham gave sheep and oxen to the king as sacrifices to seal their pact. But when he took 7 ewe lambs and set them off by themselves, the king inquired, why are you doing that? And Abraham replied, they're my gift to you as a public confirmation that this well is mine. So from that time on, the well was called Beersheba, meaning well of the oath, because that was the place where they made their covenant. Then King Abimelech and Phicol, commander of his army, returned home again, and Abraham planted a tamarisk tree beside the well and prayed there to the Lord, calling upon the eternal God. And Abraham lived in the Philistine country for a long time. Genesis 22:1. Later on, God tested Abraham's faith and obedience. Abraham, God called. Yes, Lord, he replied. Take with you your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go into the land of Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will point out to you. The next morning, Abraham got up early, chopped wood for a fire upon the altar, saddled his donkey, and took with him his son Isaac and 2 young men who were servants, and started off to the place where God had told him to go. On the 3rd day of the journey, Abraham saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the young men, and the lad and I will travel yonder and worship, then come right back. Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering upon Isaac's shoulders while he carried the knife and the flint for striking the fire. So the two of them went on together. Father, Isaac asked, we have the wood and the flint to make the fire, but where's the lamb for the sacrifice? God will see to it, my son, Abraham replied, and they went on. When they arrived at the place where God told Abraham to go, he built an altar and placed the wood in order, ready for the fire, then tied Isaac and laid him on the altar over the wood. And Abraham took the knife and lifted it up to plunge into his son to slay him. At that moment, the angel of God shouted to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Lord, he answered. Lay down your knife. Don't hurt the lad in any way. The angel said, for I know God is first in your life. You have not withheld even your beloved son from me. Then Abraham noticed a ram caught by its horns in a bush. So he took the ram and sacrificed it instead of his son as a burnt offering on the altar. Abraham named the place Jehovah Provides, and it still goes by that name to this day. Then the angel of God called again to Abraham from heaven, I, the Lord, have sworn by myself that because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your beloved son from me, I will bless you with incredible blessings and multiply your descendants into countless thousands and millions like the stars above you in the sky and like the sand along the seashore. They will conquer their enemies, and your offspring will be a blessing to all the nations of the earth, all because you have obeyed me. So they returned to his young men and traveled home again to Beersheba. After this, a message arrived that Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, had borne him 8 sons. Their names were Uz, the oldest, Buz, the next oldest, Kemuel, the father Aram, Kesed, Hazel, Pildash, Jidlaph, Bethuel, father of Rebekah. He also had 4 other children from his concubine, Reumah, Tebah, Gehum, Tahash, Makah. This is the word of the Lord.